You've probably seen him behind the turntables on stage with 50 Cent, moving crowds across the world as DJ Kayotik. But that's not the story we're telling today. Today, we're sitting down with Dr. Kareem Thomson, the man, the father, the believer, who lost his only son just weeks before his graduation. What followed wasn't just grief. It was a journey through faith, vulnerability, and transformation. Kareem shares how military shaped him, how faith saved him, and why legacy now drives every move he makes. This is more than what broke him. It's about who he actually became.
Tell us about the version of you that the world saw and the version they didn't.
It's a great segue or beginning part of Kareem Thomson, which most people know me as DJ Kayotik now. Born in Southside Jamaica, Queens, New York. Left New York at age 18 to join the military. Most people don't know that I have a military background. I did 4 years in the Navy, medically discharged out due to some back injuries and stuff like that. But what can I say without giving too much of the book?
Which we'll go into.
Kareem Thomson, the man that I've become now, is a young man that dealt with a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of struggle, but operated in faith throughout it all. My journey is quite complicated, quite complex. Come from a background where I had a two-parent home at one point. My father was unfortunately addicted to crack cocaine. My mother was addicted to my father. So you kind of read in between the lines with that. You know, that was her first love. So the things that he indulged in, ultimately, she began to indulge in. So as a child growing up in New York, you see things that you don't want to see. You deal with the struggles of life, poverty, homelessness, you name it. I've seen it in the environments where I could have gone left and been the kid that was selling drugs. I could have been that kid if I wanted to get myself out of poverty. But something in me always told me not to be that kid. I decided to be the kid that played on the basketball court and just find a way. Only child from my mother and my father. So I just figured out ways to just keep me, I guess, happy in a sense, or content. I won't say happy, but content. But I have a very dark past.
Yeah.
Very dark past. From homelessness to my parents to just the overall struggle of just understanding and maneuvering through this journey we call life. At age 12, I became more of an adult, you know, doing adult-like things of just survival.
Yeah.
You know? And my mother has been my superhero, my rock throughout it all. She's the one that when I was going out in the streets to just hustle up money legally, it was to make sure that she was okay so we can have another day to survive. And our closeness and our bond has been that from birth till now. And obviously, at some point, her and my father separated and then ultimately divorced. But we've gone through so much. And in the book, I go into great detail of traumatizing experiences and things of nature that just shaped me and molded me into being the man that I am today. Not knowing how trauma can build you to be a certain kind of man, but also can also cause a lot of damage. So as I built myself and had this makeup of trying to be everything that my father wasn't, when I became a husband and a father, I realized how damaged I was as well and had to seek out therapy and things of that nature. So it's been a rocky road, but overall, I've kept my faith. And throughout it all, I've witnessed and been a walking testimony to see that God's had me throughout the whole thing. So based on the things that I've gone through in life, now I can praise him and honor him and glorify him even more because I know based on the things that I've gone through, it's him. You know, and I've had those dark moments of questioning, why me? And now I'm in a space where it's more not, why not me? I understand it's more of my assignment. It's more of my design, and there's a purpose behind it. So I tell people all the time, there's pain behind my purpose. Every day I'm focusing on turning my pain into my purpose.
I love that. So how did your time in the military, do you think, shape your perspective on like discipline and grief and like the resilience?
At age 15, I became a second-degree black belt. So that's where my first line of discipline kind of unfolded. I was very disciplined in just the martial arts, and it teaches you discipline and meditation and things of nature and just self-awareness. 15, high school, and then going into college, discipline was gone. When I say gone, meaning trying to figure myself out. Didn't know what I wanted to do, taking, every odd job I could possibly think of, UPS, working in a department store, just trying to figure things out. College at that point in time wasn't for me. I think I pretty much flunked out after the first year.
Yeah.
I liked certain things of it, but I went to college to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. So I went to John Jay University in New York. My dream until I realized it's a lot of years to be a lawyer.
I used to want to be a
And I was
lawyer.
like, you know what? Not my thing. So after a year of college, I got out of that. And for about 6 months to a year, I was just figuring out taking odd jobs. I was as they have now in this day and age, we have like the Door Dashes and even Amazons. I was a messenger, a foot messenger. So I was doing deliveries of packages across New York, Manhattan.
How old were you?
17, 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was my driving force, but it was tiresome. So one day I was walking down this street called Jamaica Avenue, New York in Queens, and went to McDonald's. Probably had about $4 in my pocket to eat. And this is the time when you can get like a double Big Mac for like $2 and get a whole meal for $4. This is when,
exactly.
it was a lot cheaper. And the Navy recruiter office was right next door. And I'm in there, I'm grabbing my food, and he was like, "What do you have going on with your life?" And I was like, "Nothing." Trying to figure it out. And he's like, "You should join the military." And I was like, And honestly, we sat there and talked for a good 5. He paid for my meal. I remember that because I saved myself $4. And we talked about 30 minutes. And he sold me on the dream of joining the military and go take the MEPS test and figure out where you land. And I went home that day and told my mom, I said, "Mommy, I'm joining the military." She's like, "No, the hell you're not." I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "No, you can't." I said, "Yeah, I'm 18 now." I said, I can leave. I can go. And she's like, "Why do you want to do that?" I was like, "I want to better myself." I felt myself looking at every other option and saying, you know what? The grass is not green over here, but it's a fast track over here. And that fast track was starting to look a little too appealing to me. And it's like, you know what? I can't go down that path. Why? Because I know what it looks like. I know what that darkness looks like. I know what it does to my community. I know what it's done to my own household. So nevertheless, even though that path is so fast tracked and the money is there, I just consciously can't do it. So I jumped ship and joined the military. And 4 years in, military was challenging in a sense of not the discipline. I enjoyed that aspect of it. Getting up early in the morning, getting the work done. You have to test everything to move up in rank. And again, I just was over the whole book testing. Schooling and books, it just wasn't my thing. It was like, that was at least, I'd rather do, as we call it, OJT, on-job training, do it that way versus reading a book and studying it. Just wasn't my forte. So when it came to the time where they used to tell me all the time, Seaman Thompson, we need you to test. And it's just like, I don't want to test. Well, we need you to move up in ranks. It's like, I'm okay right here. So in my third year, going into my 4th year, freak accident and damaged my back on the ship. Fell down 3 hatches. And that was pretty much the starting of the beginning of my ending of my military career. I did physical therapy for about a year. And then it got to the point where they was like, you know what? We appreciate what you've done for your country, but at this point, you can't serve the country the way we want you to serve.
Yeah.
So we're going to medically discharge you out. So my hopes and dreams of being a military guy and 20 years invested in kind of went out the window. But the discipline, the structure, the obedience, and the understanding of working a 9 to 5, truly working a 9 to 5 was there. So that shaped me and molded me to ready to take on the real world. And I broke away from New York. I broke away from home. And now I understood there's a whole nother world out there besides Southside Jamaica, Queens, New York. And I think that was the biggest thing, stepping out on faith and seeing other parts of the world. And I didn't travel a lot, but just seeing other cities, saw a couple of countries, it allowed me to see something different than what I was used to. And that gave me the fire to say, you know what? I'm not going back.
Yeah.
Then when I get out, let me figure out what's next. But I always told myself I wasn't going back. To visit, yes.
Yeah.
To live, no.
I feel that way about once you're out.
Yeah.
I feel like once I was out of my upbringing, I couldn't go back.
Yeah.
I just had no interest. I'd outgrown that. It was a different version of myself.
Absolutely.
And
And it was so much trauma for me. So to go back home, it's like I felt like I would be stagnant. I feel like it's temptation because I can go home right now and still see some of my friends that are still doing the same things that we were doing 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're still doing this? When I first went home when I was in the military, they was calling me Popeye, the sailor man. But it was a proud moment for me. It's like, I'm doing something with myself. They were proud, but that was a running joke. Like, hey, Popeye. It's like, yeah, I'll be Popeye. But I was doing something versus just sitting there being stagnant or stale. I wanted to move. I wanted to progress and grow. So the military helped me grow.
I feel this, like I said, I feel the same way of moving. I have gone back. It's interesting. You talk about like trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone back just to put myself in the exact spot that I was abused.
Mm.
And I wanted to sit in it and see how I felt. Because when you go through, trauma, unfortunately, there's a block of time that you will sit and you can't remember,
Yes.
which is an awful feeling. So you
Mm.
don't have any memories,
Mhm.
because during that season, it was like I shut down everything, including the good.
It's real. And people understand when you have so many traumatic experiences, you want to remember the good and the bad. And sometimes it gets so cloudy.
Yeah.
Then when you have those revelations, like, I do remember this, it's like, that's your moment of healing, but it's also very painful.
It's actually, of all the stories I've done with loss or an experience, again, doesn't make it loss. It could be the abuse. It's sad that people miss a portion of their life because they just don't want to remember the bad. So they don't even experience the good.
Yep.
So I want to talk about your childhood and kind of the survival.
Okay.
Growing up in Southside Jamaica
Mm-hmm.
and then Queens, you said, during the crack epidemic, right? What was your environment, I guess, growing up?
I originally was living in Corona, which was it's a suburb of Queens as well. And in the book, I talk about, we moved from there because of an accident that I had. I was young. I think I was about 4 or 5 years old, playing outside. And this is the time when kids could play outside.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what age it was. That was kind of the norm. And my father was supposed to be watching me, and he was off doing whatever he was doing. And I had got bullied into going into a manhole, the actual manhole in the street. And these kids dropped the manhole cover on my head. I got a bunch of stitches in my head. And mother rushed me to the hospital. That was a whole ordeal. They thought I was going to have brain damage. It was just a whole big situation. Child Protective Services came around, asked my mother questions. Where was my father at? She definitely got on him. And it became a lawsuit because overall, the apartment complex we were living in was under construction, and that manhole cover should have never been opened or revealed that way. So that was kind of the way we moved to the apartments I was living in Southside Jamaica, Queens, which is Rochdale Village. Environment was Rochdale's kind of a co-op. For us, it was kind of a higher end version of a project. Middle class or lower class individuals, but living in a nice neighborhood in a sense, but it had crime. It had crack. It had its crime. We had roaches and stuff like that. We had that. So, I can sit here and say, yes, I lived in the projects, but some people say Rochdale's not the projects, but it is. Project, I always tell people all the time, the project is what you make it. So if the people that are in there are project mentality, then yeah, you live in a project. It doesn't matter what the outside looks like, it's the inside. But my childhood was, again, only child, played basketball. I played Nintendo. My first Nintendo I got Christmas time. I played Duck Hunt with the original orange and gray gun, and Super Mario Brothers was my thing. So as an only child, you figure out ways to create your own fun. When I went outside, I had very few friends initially, but I remember Christmas when I received those gifts, the Nintendo, stuff like that. This was a big Christmas for me. I talked about it in the book. I got this big blue New York Giants blue bike, mountain bike. And I think I was 7 or 8, and I wanted to ride it. It was like, oh, I want to ride this bike. So I went outside and rode the bike. I had it for good, maybe a week, maybe a little bit less. And we had this in Rochdale, we had this thing called the Mountains. We called it the Mountains, but it was basically a construction site where they just left piles of dirt that we made part of the community. We would use that as our area to ride our bikes, do our dirt bikes, our tricks, all that good stuff. So I would go over to the mountains and ride my bike. And I remember this one day, I'm riding my bike and I'm getting a drink of water, and this girl walks up to me, pretty large size girl, and says, "That's a nice bike." And I said, "Thank you." I said, "I just got it." She said, "You got it for Christmas?" I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "Can I ride it?" I was like, "No, my mommy said I can't let anybody ride my bike." She said, "I'm not going anywhere." I was like, "No," but I was a little intimidated. So actually, I know I had to be around 7 because before I went to martial arts. And she's like, I'm not going to do anything on your bike. I just want to ride it. I want to test it because I'm thinking about getting one." I fell for the sucker. She caught me good. So she gets on the bike and she's riding in circles right in front of me. It was about a minute goes by. I'm like, all right, that's enough. And she just takes off. I'm in shock. Like, I just get to screaming like, "Hey!" So I'm chasing her. And I realized at this point, she's stealing my bike. And lo and behold, it's like I thought I was going to catch up to her, and she took off. And I remember in Rochdale, we had security guards. And I ran to the security guard. And this time, my father was actually working for this Rochdale security. So he knew who I was. And I ran security guard. I'm crying, and they called my parents downstairs, and my mother was like, "How'd you let a girl see your bike?" And
well, your mom did say, "Do not let someone ride your bike."
she did, and that was a traumatizing experience. I had my bike stolen by a girl in the projects, and to this day, I'm still looking for her. By the way,
Yeah.
But right after that, shortly after that, because I was so into martial arts, Bruce Lee, every kind of, martial artist I actually enjoyed, my mother put me in karate and was like, I want you to learn how to defend yourself. And I wanted to learn karate. And she put me in martial arts. And, from losing my bike, I became a martial artist. And again, that started my discipline and the journey of becoming a black belt and learning how to do kata and performing. And I got to the point where I was actually going to compete professionally at Madison Square Garden until I chickened out. But childhood aside from that, again, was basketball, karate, football. You name it, I did it. And then, basketball became more of my core thing as I got a little bit older. I met more friends on the basketball court, and that kind of took its own life in its own. So around 14, 15 is when I was all about basketball. I wanted to be Mark Jackson, who played for St. John's and then went to the Knicks. I emulated my game off of him. So it was like I was going to be the next point guard. And, I had dreams of being in the NBA and all that good stuff. So, every kid out of New York wants to be something, especially if they're into sports. And I wanted to be the point guard of all point guards. And so that was, from 15 on is I'm going to play basketball. So I was always short, but, I did good. My wife will say different, but I was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that later. Right? I was like, well, we don't want to hurt any feelings or bring tears.
Oh, she'll hurt him.
On a whole nother note, I had a bike. So I loved riding my bike. I was a tomboy, which is a big deal. Grew up poor, trailer, but I had a Haro. Do you remember what a Haro was? Oh, you have to look it up. But it's like a BMX bike.
Okay, yeah.
It's a big deal, but I did tricks on that.
Okay. You had the tags on the back and everything?
Yes.
I know. Okay. So
Yes,
I know about that. Yes.
Yeah. I almost bought one like 2 years ago because I mountain bike.
Yeah.
And just because I feel like now that I'm an adult, I'm like, I should buy something that I wanted the other version. It was a gift from like a family member because my parents couldn't afford that.
Well, truth be told, I was ecstatic about my mountain bike. It was a little too big for me.
Yeah.
I didn't really want a mountain bike. I really wanted a mongoose bike at the time because that's what was really in. But my mother couldn't afford a mongoose bike, so I wanted a mongoose with the mag wheels and the pegs. I wanted that.
Yeah. Did you even get to ride it one time?
I rode it like 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
We definitely should go looking for your bike. I mean, and it was a girl.
It was a girl. Yeah.
That's a good story, actually.
It is.
When you look back now, where do you see God's hand protecting you in your early chapters of life?
All of it, from the moment when I had the manhole cover dropped on my head to beginning of time. I think my mother even mentioned, she's shared with me before that my father didn't even really want me. He had already had 2 kids outside of the marriage. I think I wasn't planned. So I know, they had some issues and qualms about it, but ultimately she, I was her first child, so she was definitely going to have me. But I think he had a hand on me from day one. I know my mother talks about at the time when I was choking on my milk and she had to go to rescue mode. And so, they talk about how cats have 9 lives. Yeah. I just know I've been heavily protected and covered throughout it all. Whether it been that incident to fights, being shot at, I've experienced a lot of different things that I'm grateful to God that he's covered me and had his hand on me the entire time.
I feel like now that I'm in my late 40s, it's funny when you can look back, not necessarily see it when it's happening and realize, okay, that was God's plan. And it's like your book, right? Like all those things needed to happen that led up to today, right?
I went through, in life and early stages, even in the adulthood, of thinking I was in control. And when things happen, suddenly you realize you have no control. And then when you grow in your faith, you realize you have to give him complete control. What's my assignment? Thank you for waking me up today. Now, what's next for me to do? Because when we wake up thinking we're in control, he'll remind you, you have no control of anything. Not even waking up. You just have to be thankful that he's blessed you with another day, another opportunity to be better than what you were yesterday, and figure out what's my next move, what's my next assignment. And hopefully he's sending you and delivering you signs that you're paying attention to so you can stay on course. But, if you get off course, he's prepared to take you off course and bring you back. You know?
I was like, he's probably done that so many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The control thing, I think for a lot of people, like I live in faith.
Mhm.
Like that's been my strength. Like just believing God has, a plan. Reading some, there's a NF, the singer NF has a song. I can't think of the name of it, but there's a tagline that he says in there, the control controls me. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. Because it's like we all want to control it. And ultimately, it controls us versus just stepping back and going, okay, let's just rely on God. I mean, you free yourself completely.
I don't even use the word control anymore. I just trust.
Yeah.
I give all trust, because I've been in that space of thinking I'm doing this. I got this job. I bought this house. I.
Yeah.
When you remove that I and realize that that's not even you doing it, those are all blessings and mainly lessons that you have to learn from. Then you start living. When you start giving it to him and realizing, okay, you're in control. What's next? Thank you.
Yeah.
Now you're living.
It frees you from so much. I think of faith in general just is a completely different way of living.
It's scary.
Yeah.
But it's so refreshing, because when you receive that confirmation and clarity in certain things, because we question all the time.
Yeah.
We question ourselves. We question, we'll have moments of questioning God and saying, why? But then he just puts it right in your face like, I told you this a long time ago.
Yeah.
You didn't see it. So let me reveal it to you in a better way that you can understand.
Yeah.
And he slaps it right in your face like, oh.
I think it's being open to it though, right? To receive that.
Yes.
That's part of it too. So I want to talk about your son, the loss of Dante, just losing your only son. So take us to the moment of losing Dante, and how did it shift your entire world?
When I lost Dante is when I was in that space of thinking I was in control of everything. I was seeking stardom, fame, fortune. I was living the life of DJ Kayotik and sacrificing a lot of things, namely family, chasing the money. Still in my mindset, because I came from such a dark space of not having things, I felt like if I'm financially stable and able to provide for my family, I'm doing what a father and a husband is supposed to do at all costs. That's the priority, to make sure my family is good financially, not taking into account how precious time is and how valuable time is over money. Leading up to that, Dante and I had challenges in our relationship when he and his mother and I parted ways and decided to just co-parent. That was a struggle for all of us. I think the way I did it was probably selfish, because I was still trying to figure things out. And at that point in stage in my life, I chose me over anything and everything, and didn't look at the repercussions of it, how it was going to impact him, how it was going to impact her. I just wanted to find my own happiness and joy. And I felt like parting ways was the best thing to do it. I moved to Texas to be with my son. And again, I had this mindset of being everything opposite of what my father was. Being present was the most important thing. Being financially capable of taking care of my family was the most important thing. Things that I didn't have growing up. I'm paying the bills, then I'm the man's man. But not realizing that trauma was still revealing the damage that I had in me of not understanding the core foundation of being a father, being a boyfriend at the time, and just understanding the dynamics of things of how to fully nurture a relationship with a father-son relationship. So as we did that, we had a distance relationship. I was 2.5 hours away from him, still thinking that was going to be a productive relationship, but it wasn't. During that time frame is when I met my wife, and that's a backstory that goes within itself, but that was my soulmate in a sense for me. And there was no turning back. And I expected him to accept that without the proper introduction, not realizing that his mother's hurt and a son is going to side with his mother. And I sacrificed that of saying, well, he just doesn't understand. He needs to understand. And that was the approach I took. And then my wife kind of rallied me in and said, that's not the way to do it. And so it took some time getting our relationship back on track, building a relationship and strengthening it. And I think what helped our relationship is that despite it all, Dante wanted to become a DJ. That was our true connection. Of he does want to follow in his father's footsteps. He is proud of me. And we builded a bond, and, it just wasn't, he was putting me on in music and stuff like that. So our relationship changed dramatically to, we were both DJs, and I'm seeing him do his first gig, and we're in the studio doing a mixtape together. So over the years, our relationship strengthened. He was driving up here to see his sisters. So everything changed. He was good with my wife and, stepmom, and a blended family was now here. So things were great. I was working in a radio station doing a morning show, and he had just decided to commit to Stephen F. Austin University. He was going to be a pharmacist. Dante had a plan. He was going to be a DJ, a pharmacist, legitimate pharmacist, and he was going to get us a sneaker boutique. He was into all the top Nikes, Jordans. That was his thing. He was a kid that would sit outside when sneakers was going to drop, and he'd be out there for hours to make sure he got the new Jordans. So he had a full blown plan of how he was going to college, and he had already had himself booked out for DJ gigs and everything. So his plan was set. He was getting ready to go to prom, and the day before prom, I found this out recently. The day before prom, he went to Shreveport to get his tux, and then that same day, that Friday, he sat outside to get the new Jordans. That Saturday, without telling me or his mom. And he used to tell me everything, like what I'm doing today, stuff like that. But it's one of the days he just chose not to tell us, and we knew why. He decided, him and his friends, his best friend and his cousins decided to go to a lake. I guess it was kind of a ritual because he was getting ready to graduate from high school. It was kind of a ritual to jump into this lake. Just kids doing kids things. East Texas is one of the things that they do. Story is, he jumped in the lake. His friend jumped in the lake first, and there was some rocks. It was very shallow, and his friend was waving him down not to jump in, and he was already midair. They said he had the biggest smile on his face because he was being defiant.
Yeah, totally.
But Dante's never. I mean, it's like he was just stepping out on his own and saying, "I want to do something that nobody was expecting me to do." And he had his head on a rock and came back up, and they thought he was coherent, and he wasn't. And his friend Charles grabbed him because they realized at that point he wasn't coherent. But the tide was too strong, and he had to let him go. And then an hour or maybe 2 hours later, they found him. I was coming off of a long night at work at a club I was doing here in Dallas. So drunk night, club night, DJ Kayotik night, and I'm half asleep, and I get a phone call from his mother saying they can't find him. I wake up and I'm like, what do you mean they can't find him? He jumps to a lake and they can't find him. And I'm not understanding. It's just not processing. Forget the alcoholism. All that goes out the window at this point. I'm in daddy mode of, what do you mean you can't find my son? I think my wife was just coming back from grocery shopping, and I told her, and she saw how frantic I was, and she immediately said, I'm driving. And we hopped in the car and drove 2.5 hours to get to East Texas, and probably an hour in to the drive, as I prayed and cried and reflected and thought about all the times I could have made this drive to East Texas to go see a football game, a baseball game, a basketball game, take him to get something to eat, take him to go get some Jordans, all those missed opportunities, time that I missed because I was chasing the bag. And an hour and a half later, I get a phone call, and I could just hear by the tone of her voice, she said, they found him. I just lost it because I could just tell what it was. And my wife, I think we pulled over for a minute to get ourselves together. And right then and there is when my world crumbled, right before me. That's right then and there is when God humbled me, crumbled me all at one time. Everything I thought I had control of, I realized I had no control.
I almost could cry because, not that I've lost my children, but I think of time. And, I was a young mom at, 16, and I did the exact same path you did, where I gave her everything I didn't have, shopping and gifts and, the life, hey, we're going to have a house. We grew up in a trailer, like all the monetary things, right? And I remember, this is probably 10 years ago, my daughter said to me, I think I had asked her, like, how did you feel about your childhood? Just to ask her. And she was like, the only thing I ever wanted was time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just looked at her, and she's like, it's not that I don't want to like say I didn't have a bad childhood, but I never wanted all that. I wanted your time. And
I remember Dante's mom telling me how he used to complain about not having enough time with me.
Yeah.
And I used to just blow it off and be frustrated. And I wish I can go back and not have those conversations. I wish I can go back and give him the time that he was asking for. You know, the only thing I have to go off of is, at least I know the last conversation I had with him, I remember telling him I love him. I remember telling me he loves me back, not knowing that was going to be my last conversation with him.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. Time is precious, but I mean, I did the exact same thing. I thought I was going to just shower her with everything, and I missed, I have it now, right? But I missed out on a huge chunk of her childhood.
I have a lot of regrets.
Yeah.
I have a lot of regrets, and I had to heal from that. That was my journey. What do I do after that? And I had to seek therapy and learn how to heal and deal with my regrets and deal with my selfish ways. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Reason why I did the book. The book has been part of my healing process and my therapy, and it still is. My story's still being written. Yeah.
That's how I feel. I mean, healing's an ongoing journey. So how do you think your faith evolved in those moments? Because you saw God throughout your lifetime, but in that moment, like, you could be angry with God.
That moment, what I didn't allude to, is that was Easter weekend. It was the Saturday before Easter Sunday that my son passed away in 2015. We decided to go to church. That's all I knew at that point, that I had to go to church. So I wasn't angry at God. I needed direction and clarity and understanding. And I had a close relationship with, still do, with my pastor. And I knew that we needed him. At that point right there, I was probably more of I. It was a we thing, but I was definitely still I, because I was hurting. Everyone was hurting, but I was hurting. And I needed to be a better understanding. And the first thing my pastor told us and told me directly was, Dante's done his job. His job is already done. God brought you here so you can be closer to him. You have a bigger assignment ahead of you. I'm going to be your corner man through it all. So I talk about that in my book. You know, God humbled me and crumbled me to bring me closer to him. And what I thought was faith before was nothing.
Yeah.
That's when my faith journey, my faith walk began, because that's when I really had to trust him in all of it, of learning me, seeing my flaws, pulling the Band-Aids, recognizing the trauma, recognizing my mistakes, not blaming him, looking in the mirror. When you start looking in the mirror at yourself and seeing it, you know, everything, again, I went in this mindset of trying to be everything opposite of my father, but I still had things in me that reflected of him. I still made maybe not the same type of mistakes, but I made mistakes. And I had to learn how to be a man of God, a stronger man of God. The only thing I questioned God was just, why did you build me to be this strong? There has been moments that I wanted to give up. And I've asked him, like, why did you make me this strong from childhood to now? Why? Why me? Because it gets to a point, I was watching a church the other day, and they was talking about being on the front line for so long, and you get tired of being on the front line. Sometimes you want to take a break from the front line and push somebody else to the front and just take, let me get a little vacation. I told my wife the other day, I've been on the front line since I can remember. I have not gotten off the front line, and I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's a purpose that's being revealed every day, all day, through my pain, and I have to find a way to keep going. But I don't poke my chest out and say I'm the strongest man. And I've learned through it all. I am damaged. I am emotional. I am soft-hearted at times. Weak man, no. With all the other attributes of being soft, sensitive, but my strength supersedes that. I look at this generation and the things that our kids are going through, and I read a portion of the chapter to my daughters the other day, just to kind of reveal some things to them. I told them once the final manuscript is done, I'm going to read the entire book to them. I want them to see what their father, who their father is, what their father is, why their father is, before the world does. They said something to me very profound. They said they don't really know me. And I took heed to that, because my daughters are 12 and 13. These last 10 years, I probably have not been as connected as I need to be because of my own hurt, my own grief. And through my wife and through counseling, I've learned how to open up a little bit more, but there's still work to be done. And I'm thankful that I did get this book done. I'm thankful I do have a manuscript that I can kind of share with them and say, here, who this your father is now. And my wife told me this is just recent. She's like, before you reveal yourself to the world, and your kids need to know. Now it's more of I'm excited about finalizing the manuscript because I want them to know exactly who their father is. My passion, my pain, my purpose. Why do I keep pushing? Why I keep driving? Why I won't stop? The strength that I have in me. And of course, God.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Even doing this, when I started my story, I had to share with Colton because I didn't want him to hear it from anybody else.
Yes.
My childhood, and he's born to that. And so I sat down with him just so he understood like that happened with my mom. And because I don't have a relationship, with my family. And he doesn't obviously see that with us. Him and I are so close.
Right.
And so he, I tried to explain it to him, but it was, I think it's such a beautiful thing letting our kids into our world, because I think growing up, our parents didn't do that. They weren't emotionally available. They didn't have a sit down conversation of like, here's who I am.
Yeah.
Like really get to know, your parents. So I love doing it with Colton now, just talking about like, this is mom. This is how she grew up. This is how she was feeling as a little girl.
Yeah.
And this is who she is today. And even in the car doing the podcast, it was like, hey, bud, God's got a plan. We're going to change the world in a positive way, but I want him to know like our mission here is we have a purpose. God put us here for a reason.
Yeah.
And so we have to fulfill that. We have to serve. So we're going to do this,
It's important.
But I love, your daughters are going to love that because I know just with my little.
Jewel, like, I think, I know they're going to love it. And, Dante, when I started my nonprofit organization, Dante was an intricate part of that. He actually DJ'd my first event. So one of the things that I take pride in is that all of my kids, my son with his mom, Nikita, and Jewel and Jayla with Vanessa, is that all my kids are active in the vision of serving and being in the community.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to me because, again, I'm a kid that came from a impoverished neighborhood, homeless, hungry, and I've strived to make sure that none of my kids have ever experienced that. But I also want them to understand that privilege that you guys have is from hard work, dedication, perseverance, resilience. It doesn't come easy. And there's people like you that may not have it as easy as you do. And they've been able to witness it and give back. My kids go out with us every year and we do feed the homeless. We'll give out blankets. We'll give out turkeys. We'll do the back to school events. All those things are important. It's more gratifying for me to see my kids doing it, putting a smile on a kid that may not have a backpack, might not have a haircut. And we're providing that for them because I tell my kids all the time, I was that kid that didn't have a backpack. I was that kid that didn't have a haircut. This is why daddy's doing this. And I think they're getting it more, but I feel like the book is going to bring it all home.
Yeah, I don't think we do enough of that in our community, like the whole serving. Like I just had the conversation with a girlfriend about just how getting our kids back to that, because I teach that too with Colton and Maddie, of the things that they have, like our Amazons and all this quick instant gratification.
Yeah.
I'm like, I grew up where we were on like food stamps and WIC.
We just talked about this.
Oh yeah. So like I appreciate having Velveeta cheese. Like it's so crazy. But
we had welfare cheese. That's the hard cheese that you got to melt for like 30 minutes before you make a grilled cheese.
Maybe we had that. But we had powdered milk. That I think we had powdered milk. And I remember our cereal was like, instead of Captain Crunch, it would have been
Crunch
like
Captain
King Vitamin. I think we had King Vitamin or something.
Yeah. Fruits of Loop. Yeah,
exactly. All the generic stuff. But I try to tell them like all these things we have, those are such a privilege. And I think they don't, just unfortunately the world we live in today, it doesn't represent that. Everything is very fast and at our fingertips. I mean, it's like, I heard Colton the other day, I think it was like, if you order it now, you're going to get it at like 4:30. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't need it at 4:30. Like we really don't. But that is not how life needs to be like that. We're, we don't need that instant. So I've tried to go back to like serving the community too.
It's important. And we one of the main things we focus on, and we're going to grow the foundation even more, is philanthropy work. I can be on any stage in the world touring, but what gratifies me more and satisfies me to the pit of my stomach is giving back to the community. I love talking to the folks, sharing my story, being relatable. The biggest thing, I've been in radio for 15 years before I retired. And, when I would share my story, they would look at me like, "You really like one of us?" Yes. I would have been this person out here looking for a free turkey and a meal.
Yep.
So I'm out here for that very reason. I'm not out here just because I have it like that. I'm doing it because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like for you to be on that line and humble yourself enough to be on this line to wait for a free turkey. I know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell them that and share that with them, it changes the dynamics of things. It's a respect thing. Like, okay, he's not just out here being a radio personality or celebrity, however they look at it. He's the community.
Yeah.
And I'm not from Texas, but I'm here.
Yeah.
So wherever I reside is still Southside Jamaica, Queens for me. And that's how I see it. And being able to give back and touch the folks that need to be touched and instill them and motivate them and bring positivity is my focal point.
That's my whole mission.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. I think it's just giving back, right? I want to make a positive impact on people. Like, and I think coming from our backgrounds, there's I don't know, there's no other gift than to start serving others and doing things for the greater good.
Absolutely.
And just so you know, so you guys have to tell me what that is all like, because I will make sure I will participate in all that along with my kids.
Absolutely.
And I have a lot of friends that would get involved, just of serving, because they're all trying to teach their kids. Just
put you on the volunteer list.
No, for real.
Okay, no,
like
serious.
I have a list of people that we've had this conversation about, like, how do we get our younger kids and the younger generation involved in community?
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested.
Okay.
Before I go into the book, I want to talk just about faith, because I think that's so part of the healing. So what did healing really look like for you kind of in the first months and years kind of after your son,
A lot of prayer, a lot of crying, a lot of isolation. I isolated myself from the world. I programmed myself to just go to work, come home. And I fell kind of into a depression and went from 180 pounds to 240 pounds, just eating, just to eat.
Eating your feelings.
Not having any motivation to do anything except go to work. But a lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching, a lot of dark moments, but a lot of conversations with God are just saying, help me get through this day. I know tomorrow's not promised, but I need help with this day. I remember being on the radio and be done with the break and 979 to be DJ Kayotik about, get off the break and just start crying. And somebody comes to like, you okay? I'm like, I'll be all right. Give me 5 minutes. I remember driving in the car and having to pull over, not being able to make it. I remember getting to work 5 minutes late because I had to pull over because the emotions took over my body and I just hyperventilating, like I was having an anxiety attack. Just the pain was overwhelming. I remember the dark thoughts of just wanting to not be here and operating in faith and saying, God, I'm going to just trust you through this, but I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to give up. You can't give up. I have a job for you to do. You have a family to take care of. You have an assignment. You might not see it and understand it right now, but I'm not going to let you give up. The moments when I would tell myself, I'm done, I'm ready to check out, he would step right in. That slap in the face I talked about earlier, it's a slap in the face like, you can't give up. I have a job for you.
Yeah.
It's not that easy. It doesn't work like that. That's all part of my faith walk, my faith journey, and just trusting. Just a lot of prayer, a lot of spiritual growth, going to church, therapy. Finding a therapist was part of my faith walk because in my community, the Black and brown community, they sometimes, we don't do therapy. That's, therapy was that. It's needed. It's frowned upon. And then a man doing therapy, it's frowned upon. I had to pull those layers back and just say, you know what? I need help. I can't do it by myself. And I can operate in the spirit, but the flesh in me can consume you sometimes. And I had to stay steadfast in operating the spirit and trusting my wife, trusting my kids, trusting my therapist, trusting God. And it was a battle. It wasn't easy.
Well, and I think as a man too, which just talking about is showing your feelings. Like, you guys have feelings and not have to put on this armor of like underneath there's a.
I remember my therapist and I used to bump heads. My wife would tell you, I went in there, I did not want to address anything regarding my father. I forgive him, I'm good.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, Kareem, we'll come back to that. And that went on for months. I'm good. Why we gotta talk about it? I'm good. I forgave him a long time ago. And then when he passed away, I was faced with the opportunity or the proposition, if you would, of go to the funeral. My mother begged me, like, go to the funeral. And I was like, I fought her on it, like, nah, how do you forgive this man for what he's done to us? I forgive him, but I don't forget. And between my mother on me, asking me, begging me, Vanessa, my wife, saying, Kareem, it's part of your healing journey. Remember what Wanda, that was the name of my therapist, Wanda's taught you. I went and prayed and asked God for clarity, asked God for direction. Sometimes you got to ask God for the steps.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is, I bring, no line of sight, not anything was in front of you. And I asked God for the steps. Is this the walk I need to take? And he said yes. And I flew myself to New York and went to my father's funeral. I had not spoken to him in maybe 15, 20 years. And I forgave him at that moment. I let it all go. It was the time to let it all go. All the time before that, when I was saying I forgave him, I didn't. At that moment, I literally let go and said, God, I'm trusting you in this walk. I'm operating in pure faith. And you're telling me to forgive this man for everything he's done to me and my mother. All the pain, all the heartache, all the trauma, forgive it all and trust you. And that moment, my life changed.
I almost could cry because it brings back to my experience. So my mom, who allowed my abuse, I forgave my mom in my early 20s. And I don't know how God gave me this self-awareness. I really don't. Mm-hmm. And perspective. And in my early 20s, I went through some weekend retreat that someone paid for. Mm-hmm. And it was forgiveness. And I was like, how do I forgive somebody who basically stole my childhood, right? Mm-hmm. But the gift is for you. Like, when I forgave my mom, it didn't matter. I had read a letter to my mom, took her out to dinner and read a letter. And it was about, I forgive you for all the abuse and allowing the abuse. And I remember she didn't really care, but I remember leaving that day and the weight off of me of like, that was on her. And it was, and it's like your dad too. It's like, I don't know why people choose the life that they chose or however it played out for them. But what happened to them? This is how I always put it in perspective, is like, what happened to them that they turned out that way? Because I don't think God creates us I think we're born all the same, right? And then I think our environment shape us. So it's like, what did your dad's childhood have that he turned out to not show up for you?
Right.
Because I think if he had the tools, he would have showed up different.
I went through that stage of blaming him, hating him, and I hate to use the word hate, but I hated him. I despised every aspect of him, of what he did to me and my mother, and didn't realize throughout that whole time of building myself up to be this prideful, strong man built with so much anger and hate towards him and wanting to be everything opposite of what he was, I was blocking so many blessings.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, when I forgave him is when life changed for me. Is like the blessings began to unravel. Like when you really don't forgive people for things they've done to you, wronged you, you are really truly blocking your blessings.
Oh, 100%.
And it was like, I would have did this a long time ago, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Your faith walk is designed is how it is. And, I had to be prepared for the blessings. So I couldn't forgive him. I guess by design, my block blessings were part of my design too.
Yeah.
But then you reflect back and like, I wish I would have did it differently, but you can't fast track life. The journey is what it is, and you can get off track, but he brings you back on track. And again, there's signs a long time ago where he said, Kareem, forgive your father.
Yeah.
But I was too resistant, but I wasn't connected to God the way I needed to be either. So I wasn't receiving those messages the way I needed to receive them. Whereas now I can sit here and we can have conversations. My wife have it all the time. It's like, that's God.
Yeah.
Like, I just know it. It's like, I'm so attentive now. It's like, look, Cause I know he's in control. So it's like, I'd be like, "That's a plane. Like, what you trying to tell me?" Like, I'm very attentive now versus just being naive. Like, oh, everything's a sign to me. Like, hold on.
Yeah.
So that thing flew over there. How many times? Like, I'm paying attention.
I listen better.
Yeah.
So you said something, your message about God redeeming every tear and setback is powerful. When did you start to believe that again?
I've had so many setbacks that I think I've always believed it. I just might not have operated in that space. I think there's been redemption in my life throughout each stage, each phase of life, from flunking out of college to going to military's redemption to parting ways with my son's mother and finding what I felt was my soulmate was my personal redemption, but also fixing fixing relationship with my son's mother and my son and getting the blended family that we have to this day is redemption. Righting my wrongs and still righting whatever wrongs I have out there is redemption. I think what God has taught me is self-awareness, taking those moments to reflect and look in the mirror consistently, being obedient. And that's all part of my redemption of just learning how to be obedient, learning how to be transparent, learning how to continuously show up and operate in faith. And I'm still being redeemed. Like I said, the story's still being written. I'm still healing. My grief walk, my faith walk does not stop. The moment you think you've climbed up that hill and said, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You've just scratched the surface. There's still more work to be done internally, externally, and for the world to see. And I think for me is my biggest redemption is just being able to pour positivity into others.
Yeah.
Being able to now share my story with others is going to be the redemption of showing people you can look like me, be like me, go through what I've gone through and still make it. Somebody like myself and my wife and my son's mother that has lost their son, lost their daughter. And I don't want them to feel like they're by themselves. I want them to know there is a community of us out here.
Mm-hmm.
We get it. We hear you. We see you. We understand. And I think the book is going to help people say, I identify with him. They might not even identify with that part of the story, but there's so many chapters involved in that somebody's going to identify with that. And that's going to help them heal. That's going to help them not want to give up. I can talk about wanting to give up and what made me not give up. And I hope that somebody picks up the book or hears my story in that very moment where they may be having those kind of thoughts, where they just want to quit. They want to go left. They hear me, they see me, they read my book, and now they decide, you know what? God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to go right because I see Kareem did it. And he's still fighting. Redemption for me is resilience, is fighting, is continuing to fight God's fight.
Yeah.
He gave me an assignment. He gave me this strength. I don't understand it all the time. God, I could take a break, but it's the constant battle of understanding my purpose and how it's being revealed to me on a day-to-day basis, taking my pain and turning it into that purpose.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Grief, something I think I read a lot about grief just in general. I think grief can come in all forms. It's not even just the loss of, it's your dad's relationship. That's a grief, not just even his death, but it's the grieving,
Absolutely,
the relationship you didn't have with him. And I read something really beautiful that said, it's love with no place to go. And I was like, wow.
Well said.
Grief is just love with no place to go.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know what to do with it. And I was like, wow, that's such a, I don't know, it was a beautiful way to look at grief. Because I think sometimes we think it's just loss of an actual death, but it's loss of time. It's the loss of the relationship with your parent. It's the loss of anything, a job.
Yeah.
That's grief. Maybe that was your identity that was wrapped in it. So I think grief is something that I think we actually should talk more about.
I agree.
Is just the word grief.
And everybody grieves differently too.
Yeah.
And when a family is dealing with certain things, one of the things that I learned is that the people that you care about, that are near and dear to you, that are part of your foundation, you can't expect them to grieve the same way you grieve, but you have to be able to identify and empathize and sympathize with their grief.
Yeah.
It may not look exactly like yours.
Yeah.
I may be in a funk for a whole day, but I can't expect my wife to know why I'm in a funk if I'm not communicating. Those are some of the things I had to learn.
Yeah.
I had expectations of everybody needs to see me. Everybody needs to know I'm in pain.
Yeah.
And then you get to that point where you feel like you're all alone. You know, when you first lose someone, everybody's there for you. And then it trickles down.
Yeah.
And then just your core group of people are there for you. Then it trickles down even smaller. But then you still have these high expectations and hopes of, you should know today I'm in pain. But if you don't communicate that with your partner, your friends, your family, how will they really know? You know, sometimes you could put up a facade like everything is okay and everything's not okay. You know, through trial and error, through therapy and communication, I've learned that you have to communicate those things of, today is not a good day. I'm not feeling good today. I'm hurting today. And that's pulling those layers back and being transparent and being vulnerable. Things I had to learn throughout this journey.
Yeah.
And that's all part of my faith walk too.
Yeah.
You know?
I think people have a hard time asking questions because they're uncomfortable to kind of open that door. Like they might want to be like, how are you feeling? But they don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
And so that's also part of the tough part of loss sometimes is I think people want to go into your world and say, hey, what's going on? But it's like, what if you're actually having a good day? Now I just kind of opened that door.
I got a lot of my friends who are dads that have sons. They don't want to talk about it at all. You know, they commend me on my strength. They send prayers and your strength is admirable, brother. But, you know, if I start talking about it, it's just like, and I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm also, what I try to instill in them is not to focus on my loss, focus on the time that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell them, like, go hug your son a little more today. Hug your kids
Yeah.
a little more today. You appreciate that moment. Go watch that baseball game today. And because I know what it feels like to not have those moments.
Yeah.
You know, when you live a life of 10 years of just looking at the last bit of pictures that you had, it puts things in perspective of time is not something you want to play with. It's very valuable. And I'm very cognizant of making sure family time is priority. So like, you know, things have changed with me is that, you know, I think again, going back to one of your first questions of where I was before Dante's passing is chasing the bag and focusing on my career and stuff like that. For me, it's God, family, everything else kind of falls by the wayside from there. And not that it's low on the totem pole, it's just God and family is the core essence of me at this point. And that's what carries me every day. Work, stages, radio, 50 Cent, all that stuff is great. But God and family is what allows me to function each and every day.
Yeah.
If that's not intact, I'm not intact.
Yeah. Yeah. All the rest doesn't matter to me. I feel the same way. So I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
So I want to understand the meaning behind it. It had to happen. And then legacy as a father, man, and obviously your story. But what does legacy, so the book, so what does the legacy mean to you now?
So the title of the book is It Had to Happen, What's a Man Without a Legacy? You know, I think as a man, when you think legacy is, what are you leaving? When you're gone, what have you left? What actions have you done? Who's carrying your name? Namely, you know, obviously, if you have a son, he's carrying your name. So initially, you know, the legacy component of it is based around my son and not having someone carry that torch for me of saying, you know, I'm carrying the footsteps, you know, the footprints of what my father left for me. Then you dive a little deeper into that. What's my footprint look like? How did I contribute to this world, to this community, to the society? When I talk about without a legacy, I have 2 daughters. I don't have another son. So the likeliness of my daughters carrying my last name, you know, I would hope they get married, you know. So that part of it is kind of nixed in a sense, unless, you know, they have a child and maybe the child keeps my last name. So I think I looked at it from that standpoint of, I don't have anyone that's going to carry my name forever and ever. But in this book, in my life journey, and the things that I've done with my foundation, my own family, my daughters, my son, my bonus son, what can I do now as a man who has had so much trauma, who's had so much humbling and crumbling? What kind of impact can I make to where when my name is put out there in the world, you remember the things that I've done, my character, my vision, my drive, my purpose, So legacy for me is my purpose. It's everything I'm doing from philanthropy work. It's keeping my son's name alive. It's being a proud father, being a proud husband, being a man of God. It's looking at the environment I'm in this worldly world that we're in, and still being an entertainer and still pushing God on people, not forcefully, but letting them know this is what keeps me going. You'll be surprised how many people on social media will hit me and say, even though you're in this limelight, and it's refreshing to see that you are so spiritual. If you knew my story, then you would know why. But now I'm ready to share that part of my story. But my legacy is still being written. I think, getting a lifetime presidential award is part of my legacy now. Getting an honorary doctorate in philosophy and humanitarianism is part of my legacy. The accolades don't mean anything if I'm not impacting my community, impacting my family, and I want my daughters to be proud, or my wife to be proud. I know my son's looking down and I know he's smiling. I know his mother's proud. We have a unique blended family that people look and be like, what? Your wife is friends with your son's? Yep. And your son's mother watches your kids? Yep. That's all God. And that's all part of my legacy. We're in the process of building a legacy home, footsteps away from where my son drowned. Purchased land 2 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 footsteps away from where my son's body was found at the lake. So we're going to build a lake house. That's going to be part of the legacy. But what is it for me? Living versus existing. And while I'm living, making an impact.
Yeah.
I want people to know my name for positive things. I want people to know who my son is, is. I want people to recognize a strong family that's gone through the mud and is still going through it. I want people to now know my background, where I've come from, what I've gone through, and ultimately instill in them just the will to win. And throughout that process, hopefully, if they have not found God, find them and understand that none of this can be done on your own.
Yeah.
There's a higher source, a higher power, wherever you look up to, there's a higher source, a higher power that's driving you, and just respect it and honor it and glorify it and praise it and be thankful. I'm thankful for everything I've gone through, even the pain.
Yeah.
I can say that profoundly now and say I'm thankful for it all, because I wouldn't be sitting here being able to share my story if it wasn't for him. I'm not thankful that I lost my son. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But it had to happen. In order for me, the guy that's sitting here right now, it had to happen. In order for me to understand the power of God and trust in God the way I do, it had to happen.
It's hard. Again, going in my own personal experience, it's hard to see that when you're in it because you don't understand it. But when you have stepped further down the faith journey, then you can look and you're like, I wouldn't want that to happen to someone, but I am where I am. And now I get to do what I'm meant to do.
We go through these storms, we
Yeah.
go through this fire, and I could sit here and say I've gone through many fires and still haven't been burnt. I'm still standing. I may have some blemishes here and there, but I've held his hand through it all, and I'm still standing. I can sit here and still praise God the way I do. And, some people probably look and be like, how? You ask him that. That's who I believe in and what I trust, and that's what keeps me going, keeps me grounded, keeps me humble, and keeps me focused. My obedience is my drive. My resilience is my drive. My faith is my walk. And that's all I know. We announced the pre-order for the book on the 10-year anniversary of my son's passing. That was his desire, not mine.
Yeah.
I had many dates out here, and when I went through the book, and I talked about doing this book for years.
Yeah.
And that pit of the stomach, like you talked about,
Yeah.
you had that idea and that concept, and you say, this is something I'm supposed to be doing. You put it in the pit of your stomach, and it just didn't leave me. And then, a little over a year ago, I finally sat down and said, I'm going to do it. I found a phenomenal ghostwriter who she's going to get credit very soon. Because, again, the pre-orders is out there, but there's still some bells and whistles to the book that we're going to release in the very near future that's going to bring it on home. But I found a phenomenal ghostwriter, and I literally just voiced the book, and she wrote it. And the way she penned it, I couldn't tell a story better than anybody. Like, to take somebody's words, voice notes, and to transcribe it the way she did, it was such a healing process, therapeutic process. And she warned me of it, that it was going to be very therapeutic and very healing for you and traumatizing in the same. But it was so needed. And I'm excited about the book, the simple fact of it talks about faith. It talks about trusting God. It talks about all the trials and tribulations and things I've gone through. It talks about constantly fighting and pushing yourself when you have no fight in you. It talks about trusting others and trusting God. Just believing in yourself when nobody else does. God does, but you got to find ways to believe in yourself when nobody else does. Recreating yourself. When you're damaged goods, how do you recreate yourself? How do you smile through the pain? How do you cry when you smile? You do it all. But I hope it's a book that people not only get to know me, but they can also see a little bit of themselves in it and learn from it from that standpoint. I think each chapter is going to be a learning lesson of things you go through and how you persevere and stay resilient and push yourself.
What would you say, I guess, because being a guy, I think I was kind of mentioning how the whole emotions and not sharing your emotions. What do you think is the most important lesson you would want men and fathers to take away from your story? Because I do think they live in and not feeling comfortable sharing their emotions.
Put your pride to the side.
Put your pride to your
Put
side.
your pride to the side. Men are very prideful. Mm-hmm. And pride can cause you to lose a lifetime of blessings. Pride can cause you to lose your family. Pride can cause you to lose your opportunities in life. Pride can block your blessings. A prideful man cannot receive a message from God because you have too much pride. Mm-hmm. I think we have to get into the space of pulling back these layers and putting our pride aside and listening, understanding. And when you don't understand something, ask for clarity. But most men that I know, and even myself, have been very prideful men. Pride has nothing to do with your strength. You could be the strongest man in the world and still put your pride down. Mm-hmm. Learn how to listen to your partner. Learn how to recognize your emotions. Learn how to be vulnerable. That's all the things that pride tell you not to do.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is key. Communication is key. Pride does not let you communicate.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it. Pride is all pride.
Yeah.
You hurt? Say you hurt. If your lady hurt you, tell her why she hurt you and how she hurt you. Don't think you got to be so prideful to say, you hurt me. Like, pride.
Yeah.
So for fathers and men, put your pride aside. Pride is what damaged my relationship with my son initially. I was too prideful. My wife had to tell me, put your pride to the side. Understand that you hurt your son, and this is why. I'm a mother. My son would side with me too. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I was prideful. He needs to understand pride.
Yeah. I think it's, like I said, I think men need more almost permission to feel comfortable sharing their emotions. Yeah, give themselves permission to share and be vulnerable.
And sometimes it does take family member. It takes their wife, their mate, their partner to give them that space.
Yeah.
That safe space to be vulnerable. For sure. I will say that is important.
Yeah.
If you have somebody in your life, whoever it may be, they have to be able to give you a safe space to be able to be vulnerable. Otherwise, it's easy to be prideful than to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Versus someone that makes sense. If you could talk to your younger self today, what would you say?
Dear Kareem or Dr. Thompson, it's been an interesting journey. You're going to be in for a rocky road, young man. Prepare yourself for a lot of lows, some highs, but it's all going to make sense at some point. You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to trust. It's going to be very painful for you, but you'll get through it. Believe it or not, you'll get through it. You're going to have a strong bond with your mother that's unbreakable. You're going to have a strong wife that is going to offer you a bond that's unbreakable. You're going to raise beautiful kids and have a beautiful family, even when you didn't think you was going to be a father because you despised yours. You're going to motivate people like no other. You're going to be led, but you're also going to be a leader. But you're going to have that moments when you're going to learn how to follow. You're going to be challenged more than most, but you're going to get through it. Your faith is going to be tested throughout it all. Even when you don't know you have faith. Even when you're at this young age, you don't even identify what faith is. It's going to be tested. And that's going to all be part of your preparation of when you do understand what faith is and what that faith walk looks like. You can reflect back and say, I see. My faith has been tested in my entire life, even when I didn't know I had faith. At a young age, I went to church, but didn't really pay attention. But I was covering. I had a praying grandmother that I vaguely knew because she passed away at a young age, but she was a very spiritual grandmother. She was the grandmother's grandmother that prayed over me and covered me and instilled that and had that talk with God and that shield and that covering. When you have them praying parents and praying grandparents, those prayers go a long way. And I think that's part of what's covered me this entire time to where when I was ready to step into my own path of understanding it, I had that shield over me. But I would tell my younger self, you're going to experience a lot. You're going to deal with a lot. You're going to have to learn how to live because you're going to exist for a very, very long time. I'm at this space now. I'm getting ready to turn 50.
You're getting old.
I'm getting old. And I'm learning how to identify how to live. My wife and I talked about our retirement plan and what that looks like. I've experienced things that I never would have thought I experienced. I've gone places that I never thought I'd gone. I've visited over 30 plus countries. These are things I never would have thought I could tell my younger self that I would tell now.
Yeah.
I've seen countless crowds and played in front of thousands and thousands and thousands. Never would have imagined that. But none of that matters if my faith isn't intact. So the main thing I would tell my younger self, if I could go back and say, Kareem, find God early because you're going to need him in the later years. I wish I would have found God the way I found him now in my early years. Not that it would have changed my design, but the walk might have been a little different. The understanding might have been a little different. The clarity might have been a little different. The approach, being a father, being a husband, definitely would have been different.
What would you, well, I'll end with your book because I'm going to promote your book and stuff. But my biggest thing is we talked about being relatable. So I wanted to also end with not just your younger self, but if somebody is going through the loss of their son, you've obviously continued that journey, but what would be something that you could say to someone knowing it's been, I think 10 years.
Yep.
So what would you say to someone, which I just kind of mentioned how grief is love with no place to go. What would you say to someone going through that or still sitting in that pain alone that they just don't feel like somebody would understand?
The first thing, my wife and I have done it, and we've actually gotten to the space where we've counseled quite a few couples that have lost their child, whether it be a son, a daughter, and that's tough. But I'm strong enough. We're strong enough to step into that space, and even our pastor told us that was going to be part of our journey as a couple, and we both looked like, nah. And by default, he was right. We fell into that space of helping identify people like us that have had losses of such. For men that I've counseled and talked to and couples and things of nature, I just let them know that you're not alone, and I understand your pain. I understand your grief. Key thing is I'm relatable because I do get it. I understand it. And I tell people all the time, it could be 10 years. It could be 10 days. It could be 10 minutes. It still feels like it was yesterday for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. I'm still healing. Yes, I'm stronger. Yes, I can talk about it. But yes, I still have these moments where I can sit in that car right now and it overwhelms me and I have to pull over and start crying to release. I tell couples, I tell parents to release. But I think it helps them knowing they're not alone. Again, it's you talked about your trauma. When you realize there's someone like you, it helps in the healing process. Doesn't change it. I remember going through it when it all happened, and we sat through group therapy, and that was probably one of the most painful experiences ever, because you're hearing everybody else's grief story, and you're hearing the fresh story of mine of this happened last week. You're hearing somebody come in saying it just happened 2 days ago. You're hearing somebody saying 20 years. The pain is still the same. So I think for me, it's when I've had these conversations with couples, parents, fathers, mothers, just being relatable and saying, I understand your pain. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to get better. It's not going to get better. Each day, you'll get stronger. Each day, you'll be able to identify and understand it more. And I do tell them, if you're not in church or you don't have a church home, I'm not trying to push spirituality on you, but I would advise you, that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've done all the pills and this to deal with depression, PTSD. That's great, fine and dandy, but I had to will myself off of that too. Teach his own. If that's what helps you cope, great. But my best advice is to find a higher source to help you navigate through this journey that you're going to go through now, this grief process that you're going to go through now. But I think it's once I've revealed my pain and my story and how it's happened, it's an eye opener for most. I hope for the book sake, the core audience, for people that know my walk and my journey, people that follow me on social media, they know for the last 10 years, I've done everything I could possibly do to talk about my son and the loss of my son. I've done everything in my power to keep his name alive, and I will continue to do so. My foundation is built around events in his name and his honor. So people that know me and have followed my story, they know that's been me. For those that don't know, when they pick up this book, they'll get to understand and learn my backstory. But then there's that one parent that may pick up that book that may have lost a child that didn't know they needed to read this book for that very reason. They can sift through all the chapters. When we get to that chapter of and the stories, the book starts off with the loss of my son. So for those who are watching and listening, it starts off, it's written like a movie.
Yeah.
And then I'm reflecting back and dial back into the story of who Kareem Thomson is and how I became Dr. Kayotik and 50 Cent's DJ and the trauma and the backstory of my mother and father. And then we come full circle to that day of losing my son. So I think it's a phenomenal read for somebody who wants to understand who I am, for, I guess, the people that follow me, the fans, if you will. I believe it's a phenomenal read for people that just want to understand the journey of trusting God in the faith walk. I think it's an incredible read for a parent that I can identify with that has lost a child. And all in all, I think it's just a great read for anyone that has gone through a struggle and wants to understand the power of prayer, resilience, trust, faith, obedience, guidance, therapy, mental health, all roll into one. So that's as relatable as it can get.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for doing this
Thank you.
For me. And I love, just like you, helping others and finding positivity and, our purpose and why we're here and to keep going, right? Like you're here for a reason. So now it's our time to serve, and it's not, it's still our time. And I love your bride for letting you take today with me.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your podcast. I wish you all the best. And I'm looking forward to celebrating like your 100th episode. Or so,
It should get better, right?
I want to come back and we celebrate and pop some bottles of champagne and celebrate, all the good things that are coming your way. I like I said, I watched some of your interviews and I see nothing but prosperity and success in your journey. And I applaud you for your faith walk and your transparency, because you don't know how many people that you're actually touching. And you talked about it off air. The people that are reaching out to you, keep going. I will tell you this, keep going. You don't realize how many people you're impacting until God reveals that to you.
Yeah.
I'll end with this. I was on social media promoting God and putting up scriptures every day. And I started off doing it for me. The moment I took a break, people were in my DMs, where's the prayer for today? What's going on? And it became more of a job, like, oh. And you realize like you're helping not just yourself, you're helping others. So what you're doing here is incredible. Keep going. because there's somebody like you right now that doesn't have the courage. You're the voice for the voiceless. He's giving you a assignment. Be the voice for the voiceless.
I'm trying to make him proud.
You are.
That's how I feel. Yeah. I was like, it's a big job. God, when we get up there, we're going to talk about this. That's probably how you feel. Okay, we're going to talk about this. Really?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
There's a moment in life that breaks all of us, but what you do after that, that's your legacy. Kareem's story is proof that purpose doesn't begin when the pain ends. It begins when you decide not to waste it. His new book, It Had to Happen, comes out September 11th, 2025. Go pre-order it. Share this episode with someone who needs it. And remember, what you've been through isn't the end. It might just be your beginning.